Okay, good morning everybody. I hope you can hear me okay with the audio. If there's any issues, I am recording today's session and I will be sending that out to everybody again. So, a brief introduction for anybody who hasn't joined us before. My own name is Niall Fahy. I'm the Technical Education Coordinator with Mozy. So I do all our internal and external technical training and soft skills training with our support agents here. I'm based in our Ireland office in the south of Ireland in Cork. And I've been with Mozy now for nearly 5 years. So today, a quick overview of what we're going to be covering. We're going to be covering the Mozy for servers. So primarily the use that anybody who's backing up their servers with Mozy, the additional features that we have for that can be used. It will follow the same format that we always do. So that's generally we do this quick slide deck presentation. I can do a walkthrough and just show you some of the additional options within the client, and then I'll leave it open to any questions that you may have at the end. I will answer as many questions as I can on the topic that we're covering here today. If there is any additional stuff that I may need to take offline, we can do that too. So we're going to look at first the backup sets that are relevant to VSS, particularly for server backups. For servers, we're looking at obviously things like Exchange, SQL Server, and databases along those lines that we would use VSS to backup. Okay, so for anybody not familiar with VSS, it's the Microsoft Shadow Copy service that just allows us to take snapshots of open files. We'll also look at network shares as well, so the ability to back them up as a server user. So user types, as we said, we're specifically here in this session talking about server users. Okay, so server users primarily is a user. It is a server user, but you can use a server key with a desktop machine, but it's primarily designed for use with a server operating system. If you have a desktop, if you're set up as a desktop user, you won't be able to use that on a server operating system. Okay. So it is operating system specific for server. Server users can back up any operating system, whereas desktop users can only back up desktop operating systems. Okay. So in terms of backup sets, how they can help you. Okay, so backup sets are ideal when you're selecting what types of files and folders you want to back up. You can use the file system tab, which is just selecting individual files and folders. Which, I mean, if that's more so what you want to do, then that is okay too. I'm just going to look here primarily at the benefits of using backup sets. They do allow you to group specific files together. So, for example, if you wanted to create a backup sets for PDF files, for Excel files, specifically in certain locations, or maybe just files that are particular to your job set. I don't know, maybe you work in a law office, and in that law office you use a specific software, and there's specific files that software outputs that you want to back up. Then you can create a backup set that will search your entire machine for this particular file type, and it'll back them up. You can exclude files and include files in your backup sets, so you can create exclusionary backup sets. So if you don't want to back up particular file groupings, so for example, if you didn't want to be backing up music files or video files, you could create an exclusionary backup set that would search your entire machine and exclude particular file types. Okay, so maybe your MP3s, your MP4s, and what other other file types you may want to actually exclude. The advantage of the backup sets as well is that they're very much set and forget. So for example, if you're using the File System tab, if you're selecting a particular file in a particular location, in a particular folder, if another file of the similar type gets selected within that folder or gets created within that folder, and you don't have that folder selected for backup, then the file doesn't, that file won't get picked up for backup unless you go in and manually select it. If you go back and use if you're actually using backup sets, okay, so if you've gone back and you're using a backup set, and again we'll take .doc as our file type, then I create a backup set and I want to back up .docs, then I select my source location as my entire drive. I select file type .doc to be put into my backup set. If I select that backup set for backups, then any .doc file that's created on my machine going forward will be picked up to be backed up. So I no longer have to worry about each individual file. From my own point of view, I suppose PowerPoints are common enough in my day-to-day work. They're common enough in some of my training courses I do. So I would have a lot of PowerPoints on my machine. So for me, I don't want to have to, every time I create a PowerPoint, have to remember that I need to add it to my backups. So instead, I have my backup set. I have my backup set selected for PowerPoints. And then whenever I create a PowerPoint, no matter where it is on my machine, it gets picked up for backup. So it's very much set and forget. Slightly different to that then to backup sets. So backup sets primarily focus on the files and stuff like that, and the particular files on your machine. VSS backup sets are slightly different. So when you install the Mozy software and we do a scan of your file system, we will populate the default Mozy backup sets that we've created. They're the likes that you'll see in their Word documents, PowerPoints, you know, My Documents and stuff like that. There is also these additional backup sets that will be created, and they are VSS backup sets. These are not created by Mozy. What happens here is that we install on your operating system, we scan it, and we see that there is these VSS specific writers there for certain things like Exchange, a SQL database, Active Directory, things like these that have their own specific VSS writers, and we can see that they're on the machine. So what we do is we populate these VSS backup sets. What you'll find in these VSS backup sets are the databases that are tied to these programs. So you will see these VSS backup sets if you have Active Directory or Exchange, as I said, but you will also, within the Files and Folders tab, you will actually have the actual complete folder structure of an Exchange database. So the same way as if you install another software, you'd have the folder structure there. You have that as well in the File System tab. So if you see these and you are backing up Exchange, or you are backing up Active Directory, then it's the VSS backup sets that you would be better off using to back up those services. Why do I say that? So it's primarily because the VSS backup sets specifically, so for example, we'll take Exchange as our example. If you're backing up Exchange and you use the VSS backup set that's assigned there for that, it's going to back up the particular 6 or 7, sometimes maybe 8 or 9 databases that are relevant to that Exchange server. Okay? And it's going to use its own specifically created writer to actually create the snapshots. so that your Exchange server can stay open and working all the time, so that your backups can occur without you having to make any adjustments to, to say, hypothetically, like, if you didn't have this VSS service, that you'd have to close down your Exchange server before you could run a backup on it, which is, without, I would nearly go far to say as you wouldn't have to say it, but it's obvious, it would just be a non-runner. You need to have your Exchange server running at all times. So that's why these VSS backup sets are a perfect fit for them. They have their own identified writer that works to actually take snapshots of these databases. So to give a more, I suppose, detailed example of why it's worthwhile using these VSS backup sets rather than selecting the Exchange system in the File System tab, I'll briefly give you a rough high-level overview of how Exchange is working. So when you're actually using Exchange, so when you're using your Outlook and stuff like that, and you're sending your emails in the office environment, where sometimes with these Exchange servers you may have as few as 200 people using your Exchange server. You may have you may be in the thousands of people connecting to your Exchange server. But every mail that's sent, that's received, that's deleted, that's put into a certain location in a folder and stuff like that, creates an entry in a transaction log file. This transaction log file is a temporary transaction log file, okay? And generally, this temporary transaction log file is about 1 megabyte in size. Commonly enough, some administrators will increase that to 5 megabytes. But once that temporary log file is full, it spills over and it creates a permanent log file. So once that temporary log file is full, it creates the permanent log file, and it keeps hold of all these log files. Okay, so eventually you have hundreds upon hundreds of transaction logs before the next backup occurs. With the VSS backup sets, what it's looking after is these transaction log files are purged together into a database, and we're backing up the database rather than the individual log files. If you're to back up the individual log files in the File System tab, you'll be using the default system writer. The system writer is not designed to work with this rapidly changing environment. The system writer works to take a snapshot of, say, your Word document that you have on your desktop, or your PowerPoint that you've opened, or your Excel file. 1 or 2 files at a time that it can cope with, that there's not, chaotic changes, not chaotic, but really rapid changes happening. Whereas with an Exchange database, when there's so many users connected to it, transactions are happening at a constant pace and quite rapidly. So it is an advantage to use VSS backup sets to back up something in that environment because of the speed that it's changing at, and also because the specific VSS backup set is designed for it. And it's not a Mozy designed thing, it's a Microsoft designed backup set that we just pick up that it's available there, and we make it available for the user to back up. Also, the other advantage you can have there is the fact that, Exchange, Active Directory, these systems do have as well the ability to do a restore wizard using VSS backups. So using network shares, okay, so on a server, if you're a server user, you will see in the File System tab section, you have the ability to add a network share. Okay, so you will need to do that, you'll need the location, always, to actually locate the actual network share. You'd also need the username and password if you have a username and password on the network share. And you do have to be a server user in order to do that. Your path, must use one of the following conventions that you see on the screen there, so server name /share or your IP address /share. Okay, so that's standard enough for most of you using network shares, as you already know. And then your username, generally, if you are using a username, will usually require one of the following formats. So it's either your domain username, your host name username, or your IP address /username. So I'll just quickly now move from this slide deck to an actual demonstration. So I'm going to open up my Mozy Pro here that I have a server user installed on. Okay, so here we have, as you can see here, so I have my Backup Sets tab here. So as I mentioned a while ago, you have your basic backup sets here, your Mozy default ones, you know, the most common ones that people create. So we have our word processing documents, our presentations. If we want to see what files are actually being used in there, so what are they actually backing up, we can go to Edit Backup Sets. Okay, so here we can see the file types that it's searching for and the search location. Okay, I can also again come in here to my word processing documents, and I can look at again what file types are there. And again, if I'm using a particular software, a particular word processing document software that's not here, the file type listing is not here, then all I have to do is put it in. So I can just put it in like that and just hit OK, and it will save. And again, it will search those locations and it will populate it in the backup set. So you will see the files on the right hand side then for the actual, you know, what files are actually within this backup set. Okay, so as I said, these are some of the default ones for that Mozy creates. So I'm just going to come here. Okay, so as you see here, if I right click in the space here and add a backup set, I can create my own backup set. Okay, so I can select my search location. I can add my rule. So if I add my rule, I have the additional options. I can search by, you know, file type, by size, last modified, was it before, after, or between a certain date. I can check I can search by folder name or file name. So most commonly enough, people will use file type. Okay, so if I say, for example, I want to create one for .mp3s, or let's say .doc, and hit OK, it'll create the backup set here for me. Okay, so I have 54 files for a size of 41.3 megabytes, and it shows me here those files selected. Okay. Although as well as that I have the word processing documents one selected, the files will show in there as selected as well, but it's not going to duplicate the amount of space. So it's still only going to use the 41 megabytes even though it's shown as selected in both locations. Okay. If I want to exclude the files, okay, I need to come down to the options, okay, and select in the Advanced Set tab, Show Advanced Backup Set Features. I come back up here. I right click on my backup set, I'll edit it, so we'll just call it webinar, just so we can see it. And I have this additional option here. Files matching this set will be excluded from the final backup set. I select it there, hit OK, And you can see now that this backup set has gone red. When I select the backup set, I can see the files and the size of the files, but I can no longer select them for backup. In my word processing documents, you can see there that the files have been taken out of the total there. If I come in here, I can't select them there either. So an exclusionary rule will always supersede an inclusion rule. And that, I suppose, would have to be an obvious one. You know, I mean, if you want something excluded, you're excluding it for a reason. So we're not going to allow it be included somewhere else or be able to be selected from somewhere else. If you are creating a custom backup set and you're not seeing it gone red here, a common error that can sometimes be made is that somebody will do it from the drop down here. They'll hit exclude rather than this check mark up here. If I do exclude here and hit OK, you'll see there that it's gone to 13.2 gigabytes. What's happening there is that basically the backup sets are just containers or boxes, or they're just a container in themselves. So when you're creating the rules, you're creating about what's going to go into that container. So if I'm down here and I'm selecting exclude from my container, what it's saying is that I want everything else in my machine in the search location to go into my container, but not .docs. And that's why the file code goes crazy. So that's why we refer to this option here when you want to create an exclusionary rule, is that you include here to exclude up here. So you're including in the rules section and you're excluding up here. Once you do that, the backup set will go red, and if you click on it, you won't be able to select the files for backup. And they will be removed as well in here. And you won't be able to select them either in the file system tab. So if we go to, say, my desktop, do I have a document Sava? So if we come in here with my documents, and you'll see there I can't select them either. Okay, so that's just the advantages of the backup sets. Again, you can, any of the default backup sets that are created, you can also use, you can use them if you wish, and just edit them. Alternatively, you can just create your own individual one. So if you want, alternatively, you can create your own ones. And as you will see, because obviously this one here is my Mozy one here is on my laptop. So obviously this is not a server operating system, but I do see, because I'm a server user, I do see these VSS backup sets. Okay, because they also pick up the COM Plus and the system registry on your machine. So if this was a server, server operating system, and I had Active Directory, or I had SQL, or I had Exchange installed, then these VSS backup sets will be created for those as well. If I click on them, you'll see here on this one that it is database files. Okay, so .dats that it's creating, and database files there for these for the COM Plus. So this is what they look like in general, is that there'll be a parentheses, VSS parentheses, and then Exchange or Active Directory or SQL Server. Okay. When the advantage then is that when you're restoring from the in-client, you have the ability to do a VSS Restore. Okay. You can download files, or you can use previously downloaded files. Okay, you hit next, and it's a restore wizard for the VSS. It'll download the VSS enabled files, and then you can just open up your Exchange, or you can open up your Active Directory, and you can actually then go in there and use the in the software, in the Active Directory software or the SQL Server software, you can actually use the VSS downloads to do a restore, because they will have an inbuilt VSS Restore wizard in Active Directory, in SQL servers, and in Exchange. And that's down to the fact that VSS is a Microsoft service, and we just use it to enable the ability to open up, backup open files for you. You know, as I said a while ago, it wouldn't exactly be very feasible if we were to say to you, you need to have everything closed when we run a backup. Otherwise, we won't be able to back up all your files. So for network shares then, okay, so inside the file system tab, you have the ability here to add a network share. You just click on that, input the share name. Okay, so you can select this, if it's already mapped, so if you've it already mapped in here. Okay, so if there's any network devices here, so there is on the corporate network that I'm on, you will see the additional ones here. Okay, and you can select them and add them. Not really sure if this will add now, possibly not, but we'll give it a shot. And it will just basically, it'll add it here, and it will show in here then. Okay, so I don't have the login credentials for that particular network share, but it will come in here, and it will just show here as an additional option in your underneath your computer. And you can select your files and folders from that network share and back them up. The only thing about network shares is that if there is files on there that you've selected for backup, if they're open when a backup runs, they won't be able to be backed up. They'll need to be closed on the network share. The reasoning behind that is just down to VSS. It just doesn't allow the, it doesn't give us the ability to back up files, open files over a network share, because the VSS snapshot occurs locally on your local hard drive. Okay, but if you do want to add network shares, you can add them in here. And again, that, I suppose, the advantage of network shares there and server user type, I suppose, is that it allows you, if you are, like myself here, a desktop user, but you have a network share maybe in the office that a lot of you connect to, you can actually set yourself up as a server user so that you have the ability to add the network share here and back the network share up. So maybe, you know, you're in an office of 40 people, you have one network share there between all of you, you're all backing up using the Mozy software, and maybe one person takes the responsibility of having a server user type and adds the network share to their backups and backs it up. So the files and folders that they have on the network share, they'll add in the network share and back that up. So I suppose in this respect, network shares, I suppose, can be obviously, you know, related to maybe your server environment, but sometimes as well they can also be related to the desktop environment that you have. So that, like that scenario where you have a couple of people in an office and they're connected to a network share. Okay, but primarily for servers that you have Exchange, you've Exchange on your Active Directory and so on, you would use the server for server type, and you could use the VSS Backup Sets to back them up. So that brings an end to the presentation and the walkthrough. I will now leave the session open for any questions that you may have on the topic. Again, I apologize for the lateness of our session today. I did have some technical issues trying to open up the webinar software. I do apologize for that. For anybody who may have had to step out or reassign their time, I will be sending on the recording of this session to everybody who was registered, and I do appreciate you taking the time to come and join us. So I will leave the session open for questions. If you do have any, just pop them into the little question box, and I will answer them as best I can. Hi, Chris. Okay, so Chris, I just got your question there. So you're saying you're backing up Exchange and it never finishes the initial backup. It's a 70 gigabyte database. Can you do a local backup and then have a backup that changes? So the local backup that's inbuilt into the client, so the so from here, the Mozy 2x Protect, that actually occurs at the same time as the online backup. So there's no specific way to separate those two. So it should be going to your local backup as well when you're doing the online backup. But if it's never finishing the initial backup, then I would, if you wouldn't mind, I would like somebody in support to maybe reach out to you and have a look at that issue rather than creating a workaround. So if you wouldn't mind, Chris, if you could email me directly, and I will get somebody from support to open a support case for you, if that works for you. Thanks very much, Chris. So you should have my email in the invitation. If you don't, I'll just pop it in here to the chat to everybody. Okay, so you should see that there. So it's just niallf@mozy.com. So that's Nancy, India, Africa, Lima, Lima, Frank @mozy.com. Okay, thanks, Chris. Can you restore individual mailbox instead of the whole database for Exchange? At the moment, I'm pretty sure you can't restore individual mailboxes for Exchange, and it does have to be the whole database. Unfortunately, at the moment. But let me talk to some people on that. I know we had requests recently from one or two customers about that, so there may be something there, maybe in the discussions of it being planned to be done. But let me have a look, and when I send on the information with the recording link, I'll pop in a message there if I do find anything out for you with. Okay. Okay, so are there any more questions there? Yeah, wait, so we would, yeah, so you'd have to have the actual physical structure there available before you'd actually have to do the restore of the data that was on the exchange. So yeah, you would need to have, so sorry, if for everybody else the question was that if you were to lose the whole exchange and you needed to install, would you need to install the server operating system and exchange before you can do a restore? So it is backing up the data, it's backing up the information in the databases. Yeah, so you would need to have, obviously you'd need to have to restore the physical hardware and then we could restore the actual data. And you're more than welcome. Okay, so are there any more questions? Okay, so I'll leave it open there for another 1 or 2 minutes and see if there are any more questions that come through. If not, for anybody who, for everybody, sorry, thank you very much for joining today. Again, I do apologize for the delay in the starting of the session due to some technical issues I had here on my end. I will be sending out the recording of the session to everybody once it's hosted onto our community at support.mozy.com. And I look forward to seeing you all again in November for our next webinar. So your question, would you require to have an image of the physical drive if in the case of a major disaster such as fire which burns down? Yeah, so if you were, yeah, obviously, yeah, we're backing up the data on the machine. We're not backing up the actual, the operating system. So, you know, you're not backing up an image of your machine. What we're backing up is the actual data on there. So, for example, your laptop with Windows 8 installed, you're backing up Mozy. What you're backing up there is the actual files and folders on there and not the image of with Windows 8 on it. Does that answer your question? If not, I can, okay, perfect, yeah. No problem. Thanks very much for the question. Yeah, precisely. So you would just need to have, if for in the scenario where your house burns down or your laptop gets stolen or your server gets, you know, crashes and dies and you have to replace it, once you have the physical hardware in place, you can just download all the files and folders you were backing up from Mozy to the new machine and then continue on. You're very welcome, Ty. Okay, so there doesn't appear to be any more questions, so we'll leave it at that today. If you do think of any questions afterwards, obviously do feel free to email me. You do have my email address. And thank you again for joining today, and we look forward to seeing you again next month. Have a good day, everybody.